This is the Crowdcrux Crowdfunding Podcast with Sal Briggman, where we cover everything you need to know to launch a successful crowdfunding campaign. We speak with proven entrepreneurs who've raised money from the crowd and want to teach you how to do the same. Stay tuned because we're about to reveal how to launch your dream project. With your host, Sal Briggman.
Before we get started with this podcast episode, I want to take a second to introduce you to my friends at Fulfillrite. If you need help shipping out your Kickstarter or Indiegogo perks or rewards, Fulfillrite is the absolute best company for you. I've been working with them for a while and I can vouch for their services. They make it dead simple and take all of the headache out of shipping out all of those boxes, all of those orders to your backers and your customers. If you want to check them out, go to fulfillrite.com at fulfillrite.com. What up, crowdfunders? Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. And man, today's episode is going to be super comprehensive when it comes to manufacturing. Raising money is one part of running a successful crowdfunding campaign, but another big part of not only crowdfunding, but also creating an online store, creating a viable business is setting up manufacturing right, getting all of the systems in place so that you have a supply chain that just works. It works smoothly, it runs smoothly, you're able to get your product manufactured, you're able to get exactly what you want in terms of the design, you're able to have that shipped to you, the quality is good, and in that way you have happy customers, they come back to you, and of course you build a successful business. So this is not just something that I think is we should take lightly, like just contacting a manufacturer in China or another place and trying to basically get them on the hook and to buy into your idea and to build this. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work, guys. I don't want to undersell that at all. So today, what I've actually done is I brought on an expert when it comes to manufacturing. Now, this individual also has been on my podcast previously, in the very early days when I was just getting started with this show. He's going to tell you a lot of stuff. He's going to tell you how to protect your IP if you're going into China with manufacturing. He's going to reveal the things that you should know about particularly manufacturing in China, but also if you're going anywhere else, how do you actually make it so there aren't any communication errors? What has he learned over the past 6 or 7 years doing this for specifically crowdfunding campaigners? And also some of the trends and some of the things that are changing. Some of the things that have changed when it comes to crowdfunding and manufacturing and creating that supply chain that just works nicely and delivers a product to your customer's front door. You're really going to gain access, I think, to a lot of that cool information. But also, this individual, I'm working more closely with him because I want to help more of my students get hooked up with verified, credible factories in China that can actually create the product that you want. I've had so many horror stories of students who try to go out there to manufacturers, they end up getting ripped off, they don't get what they want. For whatever reason, they're overpaying because they don't understand maybe how Alibaba works or how other factories work, how to actually find a factory, and they're dealing with a middleman. So there are a lot of different, I think, difficulties when it comes to this, and I want to help out in tangible ways. So me and Josh, basically, we teamed up, and what we're going to be offering you guys is a special discount for his services that are not available anywhere else on his website. So he's put up actually a really nice custom landing page just for the Crowdfunding Demystified and the Crowdcrux audience. And I'll share the link also at the end of the show if you're interested. But if you go to MorphoMFG.com/crowdcrux, MorphoMFG.com/crowdcrux, you'll be able to access that landing page. I'll also include that link in the show notes. And you can just ask a question. Like you can put in your name and email, ask him a question about manufacturing, or let him know a little bit more about your product and see if he can help you. And he'll get back to you. And if you guys do sign, he said he'll give the community actually a special discount. I wasn't aware of that. He didn't tell me that before the show. So it's kind of like a cool bonus, if you will. But I think you're going to learn a ton today. This is literally very valuable information, difficult to find as well. as well online. It is coming up right after this. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. You won't believe who we are having back on the show today. This is Josh from MorphoMFG. And man, so when I was first getting started with this podcast, episode number 3, this guy came on the show and shared tons of great tips about manufacturing. And that was a while ago, and Kickstarter has changed a lot. The manufacturing industry has actually changed a lot, the supply chain. So he's come back on to share everything with you. Josh, welcome to the show.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
To me, that felt like yesterday, but that was like, 200 more episodes ago, episode number 3 of this show. It's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy how fast time passes by when you look back.
So what have you been up to, man? Your company looks like has grown a lot. Could you share a little bit of an update with the listeners? What's been happening?
Yeah, I guess probably last time when we talked, episode 3, I might have even been a solo operation. Since then, we're now listed as a recommended manufacturing partner with both Kickstarter and Indiegogo. We've set up an office in Guangzhou. We have an office set up in Hong Kong, and we have an office set up in northern India. We're trying to expand into Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia sometime in 2019. And we're up to about 30 employees. So definitely a different company than when we last talked. And yeah, definitely there's been a lot of changes in not only the company, but also the entire industry.
Very ambitious. It seems like you've just been kind of bringing this message, which you originally started, to the world and helping a lot of business owners doing that as well. Maybe you could just tell the listeners very quickly, why is it that you started this company, and what was sort of like the beginning story like when you were just a solo entrepreneur there?
Yeah, so I'd say basically what happened is I came out here pretty ambitious, wanted to start my own company. I've always been into product design, and I looked to set up to do my own pair of headphones. And I set everything up. I got an Indiegogo campaign up. We made $20,000 on our first day. Everything was just a smash. I was loving it. Everybody that was involved was really excited. And I was scheduled to go out to the factory the next day to pick up the final prototype, which I just assumed would be good. And obviously hindsight is 2020. But I got out there the next day and basically broken heart, in tears. And it took me a while to recover. But from that, I realized that there was a much more lucrative business opportunity to help entrepreneurs like myself who didn't have the experience and understanding of how China works to skip that step and learn by proxy through my mistakes and, be able to jump kind of much further down the line without having to suffer the way that I did.
And what year was this? Was this like 2012, 2013?
Yeah, so I moved out here at the end of 2012. So that must have been 2013. I was probably down and out for a good 4 months, I would say, just kind of reevaluating life. And then, then we were like, all right, let's go. And it was, the cheesy entrepreneur story. Literally, my first customer was my grandma. She's on the Canadian national senior dragon boat racing team. And I got her whole team hooked up with like carbon fiber paddles. And then I just realized that Kickstarter was what was happening. It was the boom. It was the wave. And so I started hitting people up and saying, look, I don't know what you're doing, but the industry was so immature and young at the time that I could confidently say, I don't know what you're doing, but I guarantee I can help you do it better. And people were very responsive to that. And so within a year, we had over 100 customers.
I think the other big thing here too is like when you want to create a new product, obviously one of the cheapest ways is to go to China or to go to some of these other different countries, but they're so far. Like the cultural norms are so different. The language is so different. It's like where do you even begin,
Yeah, totally. And I think that's kind of where I started is I realized that Alibaba is probably the biggest weakness and the biggest thing that people struggle with. Don't get me wrong. I think it's an incredible platform and I think the company is amazing. But there's just so much room for error. And like you said, cultural barriers, language barriers. There's a lot of thieves on there. There's a lot of dirty business people, and very rarely are you facing people that are actually doing what they're saying. Very rarely is it actually a factory. It's trading companies or sourcing companies.
Yeah. It's also one of those things where when you're dealing with people that are overseas, there's so much miscommunication that can happen. So even if you have a great sketch of what your product will be, to communicate that to someone else and for them to understand that fully and put that into execution, there's always going to be things that are lost in the process. So I think it helps to have someone like with their feet on the ground, if you will, that can be there to sort of oversee the entire thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how is the industry changing? Like when we first started talking, you were telling me a little bit about like how to avoid getting ripped off by sourcing parts of your product from different manufacturers. I'm sure there's some other stuff that's been happening, but like how has the industry, in your opinion, been changing?
Yeah, so I wrote an article not too long ago about Fidget Cube. I think I shared that with you actually. But I think there's two main ways that the industry is changing. One, people are coming to their campaigns much more prepared. In 2013, you could literally draw an idea on a napkin, throw it up on Kickstarter, and make $1 million. In 2018, you do that, and maybe your grandma will buy one of your products. So I think people are being much more prepared. They're bringing some capital to the table. They're bringing a team to the table. They're doing marketing, they're doing proper designing, they're doing proper prototyping. And that's the second part, is being prepared from a product standpoint, right? Before, people were kind of dropping ideas and saying, this is what we want to do. And now if you do that and you can't back it up with scientific evidence, the Reddit trolls will give you hell.
Yeah, and also having something that works, or that's something that will do basically what you say it does and deliver the promises that you promise.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, I think, our biggest pivot in the last year, is that we started a new initiative called First to Market. And basically what FTM is back in the day, if you wanted to launch a product, you're talking 2 years, $1 million budgets, and basically corporations like Walmart. The advent of crowdfunding allowed people to cut that down and get it to 6 months, a year. What we're trying to do with First to Market is get prototypes that are workable for the campaign. And I think I can define that by two things. One is that it looks like it works for the Kickstarter campaign. The prototypes, looks video ready. And number two, you can prove the science behind it. So we're trying to be very aggressive with what we can deliver with, what our deliverables are for some of our customers that approach us about FTM. And we're trying to get them to their Kickstarter campaign from an idea in 4 to 6 weeks.
That's really ambitious. Very, very fast track there. And it's also something you can do a lot with that. Like you can shoot video, you can take photos, you can send that out to bloggers. Like there's a lot you can do once you have a fully functional prototype.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, our kind of, we have a 4-step process there. We do 2D conceptualization, 3D engineering, 3D rendering, and then CNC prototyping. So I think to get a Kickstarter campaign going, we're starting now to launch some of our own in-house products. And I think that the toughest thing is to be able to run the product side and the marketing side and run all of those things simultaneously as you prepare for a campaign. And I think the only real way to do it is have tons of capital and build a team, or outsource. And so that's kind of like our motto, is give us your manufacturing so that you can focus on the stuff that you do really well, rather than getting jumbled up in a bunch of things that you're only half good at.
Yeah, it's almost like being aware of what you bring to the table and sort of compensating for some of your weaknesses there. Especially Absolutely. If you don't have the ability to go to China or one of these developing countries and actually secure a manufacturing plant and oversee the deliverables, oversee the quality, it's going to be difficult, obviously, for you to get an A+ when you're putting together your product, because you're only there for part of the equation,
Exactly. Good analogy.
So when it comes to like a timeline here, because I think a lot of creators, they really wrestle with putting together a timeline, and it's almost like they include too many facets to their product, and they're almost a little bit too ambitious, and it can really bite you, later on when you end up becoming overfunded, or you don't realize the complication that goes into having so many add-ons or having so many stretch goals and stuff. Do you have any thoughts on like this concept that you shared with me of under committing and over delivering? Well, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think a lot of the times when our customers ask us, first of all, every product is different. Every process for every product is different. Time to market for a leather wallet is going to be a lot different than a very complex smartwatch, right? The time to get there is different. But I do believe that we can get almost any product to market mass production in 6 months. But that also relies on money coming in at the right time, our customers being communicated properly, the entire process rolling smoothly. So there's a lot more variables than just us. So what we tell our customers is we help them build out a Gantt chart for production, including their things that they want to do, like their stretch goals or their add-ons, and then build, best and worst case scenarios and timelines for all of that, so that they can tell people in advance. Because I think Kickstarter has evolved to the point where people are pretty understanding. They get, that there's delays. They get that if you need to make 10,000 units and you thought you were going to only need to make 500, that it's going to take longer. And the only way that you can calm them down is by telling them in advance and telling them, numbers that make sense. And then when you are a little bit late, you've already told them that that's going to happen, and you've prepared with those plans well in advance.
I had to interrupt this podcast episode because I want to introduce you to my friends at The Gadget Flow. Their product discovery platform reaches 22 million people per month. They've helped more than 5,000 crowdfunding campaigns thus far, and they have a social media following of more than 700,000 followers. If you want to gain access to their marketplace and list your own product, you can go to thegadgetflow.com/submit and list your project today. You've sort of been taking over different parts of the process. So like when you have to do a reward fulfillment, obviously you need the prototype initially, you then need to mass produce this thing, you need to get this in the hands of customers. How does that work on like the shipping side? Like, are you working with fulfillment houses in the United States? Are you doing shipping yourself? How do people coordinate that with you?
So we don't have like an in-house logistics team, but we do have tons of referrals. We do have tons of, different companies that we work with that we'll outsource with. And then whether our customers want us to manage it or not just depends. If they, we chart, for example, for logistics, we can either introduce them to people, or often they're happy to just pay us a 10% of whatever that fee is for us to manage it all for them. Because we've done it so many times and we have such good relationships with those companies that it's a pretty easy handoff for us. And back to your analogy about the whole equation, it's worth it. In most cases, I believe that it's worth it to pay professionals to do their job right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's also one of those things where if you're dealing with so many new things, whether it's marketing, whether it's prototyping, putting together a video, you sort of have to pick and choose the elements that you want help with and the ones that you don't. So it really comes down to the entrepreneur, obviously, what they're good at and the skills that they have. When it comes to like the stage that people approach you at, do people approach you once they already have like a design? Do you help with that if they don't fully know, okay, is this the right material? Like what elements do you help with at the beginning stages?
Yeah, I mean, we go anywhere from fully developed product. We're working as we grow. we're getting approached by bigger and bigger companies that obviously have more resources to do design files properly. But when someone comes to us with a napkin sketch, we can help them do the engineering files, the CAD files, make sure that all of that is DFM and DFA, designed for manufacturability, designed properly for assembly. Those things are often overlooked. I think people often will look at design files and say, wow, the aesthetics are so nice, but not really give any thought to how it's actually going to be made and understanding the inner workings of how toolings work or how molds work or how those types of things are supposed to be set up. So very often we're helping our customers reevaluate their files and figure out what's the best way to move forward.
And from that point, like when you begin to say, okay, we've solidified with the design files, this is how it looks, this is what it's going to be made out of, you're then starting to go out there and like approach factories and such. Do they have any like say in that, or are you mainly doing the one that's like vetting all of these different factories?
Yeah, I mean, so when I first got out, within a 4-hour radius of our office in Guangzhou, there's 100,000 factories.
100,000,
there's a lot of
geez.
Yeah, it's insane, right? And so obviously I haven't been to them all, but I've been to a couple thousand. And so we've vetted as many as we could. We've taken, referrals, word of mouth, who's worked with who. And we basically built a supply chain of about 200 factories that we work with on a pretty regular basis.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to working also with these factories, I think one of the big things that I kind of wanted to introduce back into the show, because it's been a while since we did our last podcast, and you shared this really interesting idea that I had never honestly thought of, and it comes down to like IP protection and how you can actually guard against that. Do you have any thoughts or like advice you can impart to other people as to how to guard their IP when they are outsourcing and going to China?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first got out here, we might have even touched on this way back when, because it's basically the foundation that I built the business on. But when I came out here and I was building those headphones, I looked at Monster Beats and I saw that they were basically being made for $23, and that the factory that was making them had the entire design file on site. So I looked around, and I mean, everywhere you go, there's fake beats, and they basically overwhelm the market. And I thought about it, and I thought, who doesn't have copied products on the market? And I think the easy answer was Apple. So I kind of reverse engineered the way they do business through Foxconn, and they break down their products into components. So rather than going on Alibaba and saying, here's all our design files, make it, then you're stuck with one guy who has a couple friends that are kind of good at each of the different components, and he has all of your files. Everybody's touching a little piece of the pie, so they're all making a little extra money, and none of them are real specialists. So by breaking it down into components, we cover 3 bases. First is pricing. I never tell people that we compete on price. I think we're definitely not the cheapest option. But by default, by working directly with component suppliers, they just add their margins, and nobody else other than us gets margins. So there's less people touching it, less chefs in the kitchen. The second base is specialists. So we're working with people who are really, really good at what they do. They only make, using the iPhone as an example, they only make the camera for the iPhone. They don't do the case. They don't do anything. They just make one component. And they do it really well. And that's all they want to do because that's where they specialize. And then the third one, kind of wrapping them all together, is the IP protection. When you have a factory that specializes in one component and all they manufacture is that one component, that's all they care about. They have the design files for that one component, they make it, and then we put it to a third party location where we do assembly. So everybody in the supply chain, nobody knows what they're working on except their own component, and they don't care. They're just doing a good job making their money and moving on. So instead of giving everything to one person, if you're successful and that happens, there's going to be units shipping out the back door somewhere very soon. If you do it with our strategy, and I'm not really aware of too many people that do it this way, then you're still going to, if you have a very successful project, you're still going to have copycats. But what we allow is for you to build some brand equity, for you to get some runway, and then they have to reverse engineer your product from scratch, which gives you about a 4 to 6 month runway at the earliest to get ahead of the copycats and build your brand name so that people will still recognize you, and you'll kind of still be the leader within that product division.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really awesome idea. It's also kind of just creates more complication through making the process itself a little bit more complicated. So it's harder to reverse engineer in that sense. It's harder to sort of track everything down, I'm speaking to the crowdfunders in the audience who have already launched a Kickstarter campaign, or have actually even successfully run a campaign. And the reason is, I think you will understand this pain point most. And that is, when you finally do raise money on Kickstarter or Indiegogo, the hardest part is not collecting the cash. The hardest part is shipping out all of those perks and rewards to your backers. It is a nightmare, my friends. It's a lot of spreadsheets, it's a lot of headache, and it's a lot of stress. That's why I recommend BackerKit. If you have not heard of BackerKit, they help you collect surveys, they help you collect data, and the entire fulfillment process is just so much easier and so many less spreadsheets when you use their software. You can check them out at backerkit.com and use CrowdCrux for a special discount. When it comes to, I've been noticing this really, not just me, but everyone I think has been noticing this really big trend in China, where there's more and more domestic consumption. More and more, the Chinese population is actually growing their economy, is actually, consuming goods and are wanting goods that are, we probably wouldn't have thought of in the last 30 years. What are your thoughts on that? Are you seeing your customers starting to sell more in China? Is that a trend that you also noticed?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with well-developed brands that have a story, and that are usually more tailored to a luxury consumer demographic. So you can't compete on cheap stuff, right? Everything can get made cheaper by a Chinese company. So you're not going to compete on price. But if you do have a very well-developed brand through a 6 or 7 figure Kickstarter campaign, you can sell here. Absolutely. The middle class here is I don't care what anyone reads in the newspaper or online or on Twitter or anything. The middle class here is growing at a crazy rate. Money is popping up all over the place. And consumers are hungry to spend stuff on stuff. So being able to create a brand with a good story and a good product, there's definitely a huge market here. And building strategies around that is becoming more and more commonplace.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you, because we've been pretty pro here, I think, in just going to China in terms of manufacturing and also just outsourcing manufacturing in general. Do you have 1 or 2 thoughts in terms of the cons or the reasons why someone would not want to go outsource their manufacturing in China or use a company like yours to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned right at the beginning of the call, we're hopefully going to be opening offices in Q2 of 2019 in Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia. And the reason is price, right? China, they're kind of ubiquitous of making crappy stuff, but those days are long gone, right? Making crappy products has been outsourced to different countries for the last probably 5 years, and that trend is more and more. So we have customers that come to us with basic textile products, and it's simply not competitive to make them here anymore.
Interesting.
It doesn't affect us that much because our core business is making complex products that people can't find on Alibaba, like commodities or OEM stuff. We want to make cool, innovative products that are hard and that most people can't figure out solutions for. But for our customers that do OEM, textiles, basic metal or plastic, that's why we're developing our supply chain to the rest of Southeast Asia, because price is definitely becoming a factor.
Yeah. And also the type of manufacturing that you're doing, the materials that you're using, the end product, different areas of the world have different specialties. It's kind of interesting how like economies grow that way, but like we're good at certain things in America, but we're also really bad at other things. Same thing for like other countries around the world. They specialize in certain labors and certain materials, and they just naturally have advantages when it comes to certain things.
Absolutely. There's a shift, right? Just a constant shift. And it's, history repeats itself. Industry and manufacturing sectors change as countries develop. China's going to be more and more service-based. But I would say there's probably a 10 to 20-year period where China's still going to be manufacturing the highest end stuff in the world just because of infrastructure alone.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you one of my final questions here. If you could share like a success story with the listeners, because I know you've manufactured for a lot of different customers over the last few years, people who have raised a bunch of money on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. Could you share one success story with listeners that you've helped when it comes to manufacturing their product?
Yeah, sure. So one of our customers right now that's just seeing amazing success is a company called Cubcoats. Like CUBCOATS. And so they have a huge valuation. They have investors from all over the world. Lots of famous people have invested in the company. Lots of celebrities endorse the product. And I think the reason why it's a success and why it's an interesting case study is because it is a textile. And I think, it's basically a 1 to 2 year old company, and they already have this huge valuation. And because of that, they want to start figuring out their margins and figure out how to do it better and get it cheaper. And as, they're supply chain operators, that's our role. But as we've tried to do it in different places or with different factories to lower costs, it's not manageable because it is a complex, innovative, creative product, and it's not easy to make. So going back to my point about how China still has the upper hand, like I said, I think different industries will have different lengths of times for how long they can survive. But, people are saying textiles in China is over. I totally disagree. And Cubcoats is a perfect example. And if you look them up, it's not an iPhone, right? It's not the craziest in terms of complexity, but it was a very long and strenuous R&D process because making a product like that perfect is not easy. And there's not a lot of factories or supply chains that are capable of doing it.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all this great education. I think it's a lot of great stuff for someone who's just getting started with manufacturing, understanding the process, understanding sort of the industry almost around manufacturing, and how to get a product in people's hands. So thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all of that. I also want to draw people's awareness. If you are interested in learning more about Morpho manufacturing, MorphoMFG, they've set up a very special link for us for the CrowdCrux community. And you guys can go to morphomfg.com/CrowdCrux, and you can enter your name, email, and any information that you have. You can ask a question and they can help you when it comes to prototyping, shipping, the design element. They can give you some feedback there. So you guys can go to that link, and I'll be sure to include that in the show notes. But Josh, thank you so much for coming on the show. This is like a whirlwind of like a whole new world, I think, for a lot of people. So I appreciate you sort of breaking this down for us.
Yeah, as a note for that website link that you just shared with the co-branded for CrowdCrux, just because we have a pretty long relationship. Episode 3 represent, right?
Yeah.
We want to give a special discount to anybody that comes through that page. So
thanks,
just
man.
so that anybody listening is aware, we'll definitely have something set up and have that available for anybody that's listening and follows through.
Oh, thank you very much. That's awesome. Cool, man.
Yeah, of course.
I appreciate you and also being an element of the crowdfunding industry, and I look forward to seeing all of your success. You've grown a ton since we last talked. Like, man, you have lots of employees now, offices all around the world. I can only imagine what's in the future for you.
Right on, man. Always a pleasure, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Again, my name is Salvador Briggman. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining me today and this week. Hope you've been having a great week, and also your preparation for your campaign is going smoothly. Everything is falling in line. You're getting your ducks in a row, as I like to say. And if you're still in that stage where you are looking for help with a manufacturer, you are looking to get help into someone to sort of comb through these different factories in China or in different areas around the world, Indonesia, etc., and you want someone who can help you do that and sort of hold your hand along the way with this process, I really recommend MorphoMFG. These guys have been killing it. I also have been working with Josh for a long time. Ever since I actually got into the industry, we've known about each other. We've done podcast interviews before. He's contributed articles to the blog. So he is really good when it comes to wanting to put out quality information and also wanting to help crowdfunders make sure that they have a seamless supply chain and a seamless way to get products into the hands of their customers and make everyone happy. So if you want to check them out, you can go to morphomfg.com/crowdcrux. That is morphomfg.com/crowdcrux. And when you go to that link, you can fill out a little bit of information about yourself, tell them about your product, tell them about your needs. Even if you already have or are thinking that you can find a manufacturer, these guys might be able to do it better and for a cheaper cost. It really pays to have professionals on your side when you're doing one of these races, just to make sure that there aren't any headaches. And also so that you don't screw it up yourself. You never know when you're working with people just like around the world, necessarily the cultural differences, the communication barriers. So these guys definitely have it handled. So if you're interested, you can go and check it out. Again, morphomfg.com/crowdcrux. Hope you got a lot of good education, information, and value out of this episode. I urge you, go and check out some of the other ones I got out there. A lot of good golden nuggets. Like I like to say, lots of episodes chock full of crowdfunding wisdom. not to oversell it. I'm serious. These people are amazing that I have on the show. Like, some of their successes just blow me away. It's insane. I feel so lucky to be able to talk with some of these incredible entrepreneurs, and also with such innovative, interesting products. It's really neat, and you basically get to be a fly on the wall as we have a conversation, we geek out, and we're nerding out about crowdfunding.